President. I shall now deliver a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Russian Federation. We thank Mr. Stefan de Mistura and Mr. Zhang Ging for their briefings. Throughout most of Syria, which is under the control of its legitimate government, civilian life is continuing to be restored, including with robust Russian assistance. The Syrian authorities are paying significant attention on liberated areas in the vicinity of Damascus and to the north of Homs province. Residents are returning there. In eastern Ghouta, streets are being cleared of rubble and homes are being rebuilt. Funds have been allocated for the renovation of medical facilities in Nashabia, Harvasta, Duma, and Malich. In Rastana and Tilbis, work on high-voltage electricity transmission lines and transformer substations have been completed. It has been reported that rail freight communications have been resumed between the provinces of Tartus and Homs. There is nothing of the like taking place in those areas of Syria which, in breach of the country's sovereignty, have been occupied by the so-called coalition, with pretexts being concocted to prolong their presence on Syrian soil. Long months have elapsed since the liberation of Raqqa from ISIL. However, there have been no changes for the better observed. The liberators who razed the city to rubble, medical institutions, bakeries, and everything else has been reduced to rubble by them. And today, they are attempting to read lectures to us about morals. They are doing nothing to improve that situation. There is a difficult situation that has unfolded around the Rakban camp, which is an area that is concealed at the coalition military base, the Atanf military base. There has been no progress observed in humanitarian deliveries. Moreover, reports are surfacing about a corrupt scheme that has been established there. Armed groups are charging a steep fee for those wishing to leave the camp, up to $500 per family. It seems that international assistance to Syria in the area of mine clearance is being delayed, including through the United Nations Mine Action Service. At the same time, the mine clearance units of the International Mine Clearance Center of the Russian Armed Forces in record time conducted 4 operations, unique both in scale and complexity, 2 in the architectural historical complex in the urban part of Palmyra, as well as in Aleppo and Deir ez-Zor. This has enabled tens of thousands of Syrian people to return to their homes. Many invaluable World Heritage sites have been salvaged. I will not read out the statistics about the number of explosive substances that have been diffused by our personnel. That number is very high. There are no justifications for the hand-wringing about the so-called Law Number 10, the aim of which is not expropriation of property, contrary to what some may allege, but the aim is rather protection of property rights that were violated during the war. The Syrian side is not evading contacts with United experts on this issue. It is clarifying details and heeding advice. The pressing issue is to rebuild areas that have been damaged due to hostilities. To that end, the entire international community, with active support of the United Nations, needs to proactively lend assistance. Assistance for the rebuilding of Syria cannot be conditioned on any political demands whatsoever. To begin, for example, it would be necessary to shield the Syrian health care sector, the local pharmaceutical companies, to guarantee opportunities for procurement from abroad of medicine and medical equipment. We are disappointed by the quality of the Secretary General's report on the review of cross-border humanitarian operations. There was a blatant error that was allowed to occur on its first page. It is noted that cross-border humanitarian operations allegedly are provided for territories not under Syrian government control. Where did this come from? A Security Council Resolution 2165, which established this mechanism, notes that cross-border humanitarian deliveries are to be made available to residents throughout the country, in all of the country who need assistance. in abstaining from Resolution 2393, we delivered a clear signal that we deem it necessary to move towards closure of the mechanism. Demonstrating a constructive approach, our decision was to afford time for the United Nations and other interested parties to set the stage for the closure of cross-border operations and to lay the ground for dialogue with the authorities in Damascus about new ways to deliver assistance to all people in need in Syria. However, the United Nations did not take this opportunity. The report fails to take into account military political aspects of the situation on the ground, fails to mention the core principles for the delivery of humanitarian assistance, including respect for sovereignty. It is strange that the sponsors of the author of the reports found not a single flaw in cross-border operations. And yet, we are well aware of the fact that there are such flaws. I wish once again to call upon the UN Secretariat to seek to devise ways to provide for a consensual and phased approach for cross-border operations in future. A departure from cross-border operations. Of late, many have spoken about escalating tensions in southwestern Syria. Incidentally, I would note that for us, as is the case for others, we are not indifferent to the security issues of Jordan and Israel. It should be noted that Jabhat al-Nusra fighters frequently organize and stage attacks against the Syrian military personnel and obstruct achievement of local ceasefires with armed groups who wish to lay down their weapons and to return to normal life. As is known, the authorities provide for such opportunities through government entities. The cities of Deraa and Soveda, as well as residential areas that have embraced de-escalation, are being subjected to shelling by the jihadists. There are other hotbeds of instability. The situation around Foua and Kafraya remains volatile. The unity of the blockaded region around Syria this is the sole blockaded area of Syria, according to UN classification. Moreover, the terrorists have stepped up the shelling of residential areas in Aleppo. Some external players are failing to exercise their influence to help to achieve reconciliation and de-escalation. On the contrary, they are prompting and encouraging their protégés to step up offensives. This can hardly be viewed as facilitating an embrace of cooperation for de-escalation. Let us recall that not a single cessation of hostilities regime stipulates pauses in the fight against terrorists. In Syria, the remnants of terrorist groups continue to be eradicated. At the same time, on the evening of 17 to 18 June, Syrian troops and their allies in Al-Hara, southeast of Abu Kemal in Deir ez-Zor province, were targeted by large-scale airstrikes. As a result, dozens of people perished, people on the front lines of the fight against terrorists, and this is not the first such incident. To whom is this beneficial? Who is providing opportunity for terrorists to rear their heads and attempt to restore the footholds that they had lost? Mr. de Mistura, Russia advocates decisive progress along a political settlement on the agreed-upon international basis under United Nations aegis. Recently, you participated in high-level consultations with representatives of the Astana Process guarantor countries. Hence, you are well aware of our steadfast commitment to inter-Syrian dialogue. We are working consistently with the Syrian side to encourage them to implement joint arrangements. At the current juncture, this above all is implementation of what was established during the Syrian National Dialogue Congress in Sochi, namely recommendations to establish a constitutional committee. The Syrian government has submitted its list of delegates. As we understand, thought is underway with the opposition camp, whose cohesion remains questionable. Ultimately, the Syrian people will have to agree upon, with United Nations assistance, on all requisite details. And in the broader context, the main objective is restoration of normal relations between Syria and other states in the region, relations that were damaged during the conflict. This would tangibly improve the situation in the Middle East. I resume my duties as President of the Security Council.